Yeah, hello Matthias, and welcome to another. I don't know which it is actually.
It's
Not.
number 8. I
Oh,
did a count
okay.
recently.
Great. Maybe we can make the 10 this year. So this would be quite a good goal. Yeah, but you did some conferences I've seen. You did some talks, but you also worked on Power BI tools. And today, yeah, quite a complex, interesting topic. The incremental refresh and the use of Power BI tools, obviously. I remember the times when incremental refresh was new to
Hmm.
Power BI at all, and it was like, oh, okay, now they're getting from this Excel stuff to more enterprisely BI. I'm I'm quite curious if you ever used Power BI before incremental refresh and how you used it. Yeah, if it was even possible for your use cases to use Power BI without incremental refresh. Yeah, but I'm quite excited, and I think I can let you go if you or do you have some special words in front? Then say it now. Otherwise, we can talk later a little bit.
No, nothing special. We can jump right
Okay.
in and see where we go.
So
All
the
right.
stage is yours, Matthias.
Fantastic. All right. Very good. Thanks very much. Um, so a new pre-release of pbi-tools is pending. It's pretty much done. I've been doing quite a bit of testing with it. I just haven't pushed the final button yet. So I want to talk through what's new in there and explain what you're going to get out of it, basically. And you already mentioned incremental refresh. That's really what it's all about. So the latest preview is going to add support for incremental refresh datasets. Uh, right now, the theme of all my efforts is about dataset DevOps and supporting incremental refresh datasets is a very important aspect of that. I'm just going to pull over here one of the standard uh, diagrams from Microsoft documentation, just to provide some context here. So when we talk about incremental refresh data sets, let me make this a little bigger here. We basically distinguish different periods. So incremental refresh usually is about time. And one of the periods is basically archive data. Then we've got incrementally refresh data, and then optionally we also have real-time data. And what you do in terms of configuring incremental refresh in Power BI, you specify what's the period for your archive data. So that's pretty much old stuff, which is not likely to change, or which is ideally not guaranteed to change, right? So this is stuff that you basically only need to load into your dataset once, and you know for sure that it will never change in the source data, so there's no reason to put it back in, right? So that's archive data, and you specify how far back you want to go here. Then we've got this yellow piece, where we are expecting data changes, and so that's where data is getting incrementally refreshed. And then if you're in premium, and if you want really fresh data, you can also optionally configure hybrid incremental refresh, which allows you to use direct query as well, for super fresh data. So just as a reminder here. And when you look at a data set like that in Tabular Editor, which I'm just going to switch to here. There we go. So I've got a data set open here, which has a refresh policy defined. I'm just going to bring this one up here. So there we go. Those are settings which happen at the table level. So refresh policies apply per table, and we can basically see we've got some incremental settings, and then we've got some rolling window settings. So rolling window is the technical term for archive data. So this is the old stuff where you're thinking nothing's going to change. And incremental is basically what in the diagram was called incremental as well. And you basically specify how many periods and what type of period you want in those respective windows. And what Power BI will do for you fully automatically, and this is actually the nice thing, Power BI will do partition management for you. So this is what you're going to get as a result. Power BI will create a new partitions as needed. It will also merge partitions when they can be combined into larger partitions, and it will automatically apply a naming convention to the partition. So we can see this here very nicely. I've got a partition called 2022 Q307. So that's basically a July 22, right? And then we've got an August and a September partition. And then we can see this is Q4 1001. So that's basically the 1st of October. And this is the 2nd of October. If another day were added and we applied a refresh here, then we can easily imagine that a new partition for the 3rd of October would be generated. So just in terms of sort of recapping on the theory a little bit. One thing which is really important when it comes to deployment, because those partitions only exist on your remote server because they're handled by Power BI service, you need to make sure that as part of a deployment, you don't touch them. That's actually, that was a limitation of pbi-tools previously. So, before the new release, which we're talking about here, if you ever try to deploy a incremental refresh data set using pbi-tools, it would actually have overwritten any of those partitions. And so previously, pbi-tools pretty much was not capable of supporting this, and that's changed now. And so let's take a look at what has changed here. So there are a number of updates in the manifest, and in fact we can see them right here. I'm just going to point them out now, and then we'll look at them separately. So underneath options and refresh, there are 3 new properties. Ignore refresh policy, skip refresh policy partitions, and effective date. Normally you don't need any of them. And then under dataset, there are 2 new properties. Apply refresh policies and keep refresh policy partitions. And again, in order to get the full benefits, you don't need to set any of them, because the pbi-tools defaults give you the right thing, and they do everything automatically. But you can play around with those 5 properties and sort of tweak things a little bit. And I've got some documentation in terms of what those 5 different what those 5 different properties do and what the default value is. I'm not going to read that out to you right now. That will come in the release notes, but I will basically show you sort of interactively. Let me let me start off here looking at this particular example. One thing I have to say up front, this is going to be a somehow limited demo, I'm afraid, because I was extremely silly and I only realized 40 minutes ago that this demo data set is currently broken because the underlying database was turned off. And because I was working on that in conjunction with somebody else, I was not able to actually bring it back online. So I had a big wake-up moment like 45 minutes ago and was frantically trying to create an alternative end-to-end demo, but unfortunately that wasn't possible. So I'm only going to do a limited demo now, I'm afraid, and we may have to do another run with a full end-to-end demo once I've got some data to query. But there's still quite a bit we can actually look at even without being able to access data. So remember, when it comes to data set deployments in pbi-tools, there are two aspects to it. One is actually deploying the model metadata, and then the other one is applying the refresh, right? And so the running a refresh, that's what's currently not working, again, because I don't have a database to connect to. For that reason, I've actually disabled refresh here. So we're just going to look at actually deploying that model. And I can show you the impact of this particular property here. So apply refresh policies it basically reads the definition for a policy. So what we looked at here in terms of what different granularities we're using. And it will then also apply the current date, and it will create new partitions as needed, right? So this is just a metadata operation, and it's actually part of the dataset deployment. It's not part of refresh. And so we can take advantage of this already if we're just running a deployment here. So let me run the demo 2 deployment. So if I do pbi-tools deploy, I specify dot as the current folder reference. Then I specify the manifest name, which in this case is dataset. And then I specify the target environment, which in this case is demo 2. And just to be extra safe, I'm going to do what if, which will verify my credentials and everything else. It's always a good idea to start off with a what if deployment, and that will tell you whether you've missed anything in terms of syntax or credentials, but we're all good here, which means I can run the same thing again without what if. So what we're expecting now is basically just model metadata is going to be deployed, and the policy will be applied, which means I will end up with partitions with empty partitions created for me in relation to the current date. So if I run this, we're going to get some output here. By the way, I just realized the October release of Power BI Desktop is out. You can actually see that there. And so here we go. Right. So let's take a look at what happened here. So if I scroll up, so first of all, this is new. So this basically says the deployment determined that my model has a refresh policy for the taxi trips table. In that case, it will then go to the existing remote data set. It will read all the partition definitions, and it will ensure that none of those partitions are overwritten. Again, previously that would have happened. And then the model metadata is deployed. And then this has always been the case. We actually get a summary of all partitions currently in place. So this is a very good way of verifying what's here. And what we can see specifically, there is now a partition for the 3rd of October. Today is the 4th. If we're looking at this particular table, we can see that that's my refresh policy. And we're basically saying my incremental period should have 2 days and with an offset of -1. So today is the 4th of October, which means we're going back 1 day. We're going to the 3rd of October, and then we're creating partitions for 2 days. So that would basically be the 2nd and the 3rd. So those 2 partitions are my incremental period, and anything prior to that, so basically 1st of October and then anything in September, pretty much 3 months going back, that will be my archive window, and so that's what we're getting. As we can see here, none of those partitions currently have data in them, and as I explained, because I'm very silly, they're not going to have any data as part of this demo. But this is where we can see 2 features in play already. One is applying the policy. The second is preserving remote partitions and not actually overriding them. Because looking at the local definition of my model, and in fact, this is what I've got right here, we can see this table has 1 partition. And in fact, it has an M partition. It doesn't have a policy range partition. So previously, any existing remote partitions would have been replaced just by this single one. And so we've got that. But there's more we can discover here. Another feature which is new is support for support for effective date. So as we've seen before, the current calendar date was used in order to generate partitions and apply the policy. And that's the default behavior, as you can imagine. However, either for demo purposes or for testing purposes, or because you genuinely have a different requirement, Power BI allows you to actually set an explicit date for you for the deployment to use. And currently, as far as I'm aware, there is not a single tool out there which supports that feature. Tablet Editor 2 definitely doesn't, and pbi-tools does. So what I can do is I can set an environment variable, which is called pbi-tools _ effective date. And I can put in there 2022. Let's put the 31st of October. And with that variable set, and obviously, in the CI/CD context, you can do that as part of your pipeline. If I now go and reapply the same deployment, it will again apply the policy, but now with respect to the 31st of October, as opposed to the 4th of October, which means we will definitely expect to see the 30th and the 29th in there as individual partitions. So let me do that too. Here we go. Very keen to see what the new October release will give us. Right. And we can already see that what we expected is happening here. Here we go. So again, just looking at the listing of our partitions, we can now see there is a new partition for the 30th of October, and then pretty much going back all the way. So 10, 9, yeah. So that's where we were earlier, right? And all of those partitions were now added because my date was shifted. If refresh were possible now, then those partitions would ultimately change from a no data state to a ready state. That's basically what you can see here, for instance. So the 9th of August, that happens to be a partition which previously was refreshed, and same for the and same for July. So this is an entire month here. Sorry, no, here, that one. 7th of August, that's the one. And if we then look into Power BI itself, and go to the correct workspace, which is this one. So the dataset I just deployed was demo 2, if I remember. There should be a report linked to demo 2. And we can actually see this is currently seeing data between the 7th and the 9th of August. And the reason was because only those partitions happen to be in a ready state. Yeah, so that's pretty much also showing us the effective date feature. If I now open that same data set in Tabular Editor, we can see a few more things there in terms of metadata. So demo 2. Here we go. So if I go to tables, so this is this is the table, and then going in here, I can see all sorts of partitions, and every single one of them actually has metadata which specifies what's the granularity for that partition and what's the start and end date. Start is always inclusive, end is always exclusive. Which basically means this is the partition for the 30th of October, and we can also see that from the naming convention here. And we can also see that the current state is no data, as in it has not been processed yet. If we go to the 9th of August, we can see that one is ready, and it's got data for 1 day, which is the 9th of August. So yeah, that's unfortunately, that's where I'm going to have to stop in terms of demo for now. Setting up an entire incremental refresh data set is unfortunately not something I was able to do in 20 minutes or so. My apologies.
I think that's okay. Anyway, I said we should maybe try to make the tutorials a little bit smaller, but it was very nice. I think to do a refresh, everyone can do it. I think it's a special thing about it. You have shown the manifest. What does matters in there for this? New adjustments, and you also have shown how to use it, how to read the output. So yeah, but maybe we can do a quick walkthrough in like as a bonus content of our next session. But I think the most important stuff is already in. And I have one question about this effective date. So this is kind of a time machine, right? You can also go back.
Yes.
But what happens if you go back and then you keep the partitions and so you go 2 months back and you have 3 months of archived data. So you just create empty partitions. and they will never be touched because they are archived. Do you know, might there be any problem?
Yeah, no, that's a good question actually. And in fact, the way how incremental refresh partitions refresh is somehow complicated. In fact, if I bring my slides back up here and switch to the next slide, this is a screenshot I took from Microsoft documentation for refresh policies. And it basically defines what the interaction is between different dataset refresh types and refresh policies. And the important thing here is that even with a full refresh, it is assumed that historical partitions have already been refreshed. And so even a full refresh, actually, and that's my understanding, even on a full refresh, only partitions within the incremental refresh range are actually refreshed, and so that puts responsibility onto you in order to figure out what do you actually do with your historic partitions, right? So unfortunately, this documentation calls them historical partitions. When you look on a different site in the Power BI docs, it calls them archive, right? But it's actually the same. And it explicitly says historical partitions are not refreshed regardless of whether they have been cleared of data. That means you really got to understand once those historical partitions been created, no matter how, you have to go in and figure out how to actually refresh them yourself. And in fact, that is something which pbi-tools can help you with, because since, let me just switch back here.
Even when you don't set the parameters, right? Then it loads everything.
So because in your manifest, you can explicitly specify individual tables or partitions with respect to their refresh type. What you can do here is you can actually specify partitions like the way I did that, right? So remember, taxi trips is my table. The pipe character separates table name from partition name, and then the asterisk is basically a placeholder, right? So this expression says all partitions in within my taxi trips table, and then I'm applying automatic to it. Automatic means that anything that has no data in it will be refreshed, right? And because we're not applying this to the model here, we're applying it to the partition explicitly, it will then actually account for them. So that's another advantage of pbi-tools, but it would be much easier to actually demonstrate end-to-end rather than just explaining it.
I understand it. So primary, this feature is for testing and not for time traveling in terms of data. So if you want to test like some months to date or year to date offsets, and so it's great. But if you really need to go so back that you need some archive data refreshed and need some deleted data again, it's like beyond the 3 months here, then you need to make a full refresh, but like this, in a special way. So even
yes, the key is that you explicitly refresh those partitions rather than just refreshing the model overall, right? If you only refresh the model or the table, it will basically account for the fact that those are incremental refresh archive partitions, and it will ignore them. If you refresh the partitions explicitly, it will load data into them. And that's a bit tricky to understand, but it also means you have a lot of power, because the worst thing would be for you to use incremental refresh because you're genuinely using billions of records, and then accidentally triggering a refresh that loads all of that data, right? So from my point of view, it's actually much better being
Yeah,
explicit about that.
yeah, yeah. I think that this is the main cause, of course. Is there's still separate data model, and now you can even deploy this and refresh only this what needs to be refreshed and not everything.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was just all or nothing. So great, great stuff, and thanks, Matthias.
Yeah, no worries. I really
No more.
apologize for not being able
Yeah.
to go all the way here.
Absolutely. It's,
Just take
if
my word for it, and we will. I will show a proper demo for this next
oh,
time.
it's quite fine. And if every talk would be that good when 45 minutes before the database is broken, I think that it would be such a good world. Maybe. Yeah. So that's no more questions actually. So only if you have some upcoming events or anything you might want to say, then you can say it now. Otherwise, we'll see you again.
Well, maybe let me show one thing, if you don't mind,
Oh yeah, yeah,
because this
of
actually
course.
applies to our little recording here. Yesterday, I uh, published a new section on the pbi-tools website called
Mm.
Resources, which is a very comprehensive list of everything I've done with respect to pbi-tools so far. So this is a listing of conference sessions, user groups and meetups, video tutorials, and that's why I'm mentioning it. There's a dedicated section
Yeah.
here for our tool talk. That's also how I knew that we were on number 8 today.
Mm.
For everyone's reference, every single previous session is listed here, including a direct link to the recordings as well as um, as well as a brief
Cool.
description of what we actually covered there. So we've got that, and we'll add a link for today's recording once it's available.
Great. Great. And here also what interesting for me was your discovery about the October release because it's not even in the Microsoft blog. There are
Yes.
no release notes for it. So, but when I look into the download section, there's really date published is the 4th of October. So either you're slightly before the release, that may happens, or it's maybe like a hotfix or anything.
Yeah, no, let me show that too, because again, that's a pbi-tools feature, right? So if you use pbi-tools info and then you put check there,
Mm.
it will actually go off to the Microsoft download page and see what's available there. And
Ah,
that is showing down here. And we can see
mm,
this is actually 109, which is the September version.
okay. But yeah, from the
And
4th of October, that's what I
but it
checked.
yes, but it does say 4th of October, which is very strange. However, when you look at what I've got installed on my machine, you can
Mm,
see that there's a
mm,
110 version here, which also does say 22.10, right? And that's the Microsoft Store version. So somehow the
mm.
Microsoft Store has pushed an October release onto my machine. Um, let's see. Maybe I'm the first one, but I doubt that.
Okay. Okay, cool stuff. So Microsoft changed the installment policy this month, integrating Power BI more into Office, and the the promise is you don't have to install Power BI Desktop manually
Hmm.
uh, more over and over again. I'm waiting for it. I still have the 109 version, but
Hmm.
even beside that, it's quite a good feature to detect the hotfixes. If you're waiting for one hotfix, I think it's yeah. I don't really watch the some
Mm.
Microsoft sites to see okay, is there any hotfix? But this is quite a comfy way to check if there's any newer version than my version, actually.
Yeah, so basically 109 September, right? So 1021, that's definitely a hot fix, which looks like it came out today because the previous September version was 782, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's getting very technical right now, but
Yeah, yeah.
this is
This,
pretty much how you can see, and it's quite weird that on the same day, but we get a September hotfix, we also have the October release. We shall see. Maybe there's some mix-up in the version numbers there.
okay. Yeah, but also thanks for that. I didn't knew this. Yeah, and this way to use Power BI tools because the feature is quite easy and straightforward, but it's something more new for me. Great, yeah. And then Matthias, thank you, and
Thank you. Really
see you
appreciate
next
it.
time. And thank to everyone. I've seen that some people are watching, but even if you all are quiet in today's evening, well, I hope you still enjoyed it, and see you next time.
Okay, fantastic. Looking forward to number 9 next time round.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.